Hey, so I wanted to make this video to, well, for a couple of reasons. One is I wanted to thank everybody who made videos prior to this about having an ablation, a cardiac ablation for Afib, which I just had exactly a week ago today, my first time. Hopefully my last, but it was my first one, and it had been scheduled for a while, and I did a ton of research, read everything I could, watched everything I could online, and so many of the videos really helped. So many of the writing helped as well, or so much of the writing helped. But the videos were really good because people were just kind of, talking about their situation and what they went through. And, like anything else, the more you know, the better you're prepared, I guess. So I'm making this video to hopefully help people who are going into their first ablation at some point in the near future. And I'll describe what I went through and what it's like now. It's only a week out, but it's all still very fresh, and I wanted to get it out now. So again, thanks to all the people who did their own video on Afib and their ablation that I watched and helped me, and hopefully this is going to help some other people. So as I mentioned, I was diagnosed with Afib about almost 2 years ago. I know I suffered from it for at least 10 years prior to that. I just never knew what it was. I was always told it was anxiety. And that's not really the fault of the doctors. Anytime I brought it up to one, I wasn't in Afib. I wasn't having an episode, so there's really no way to detect it. Luckily, though, I was at a regular physical, regularly scheduled physical, and my doctor was listening actually to my lungs, and she said, "Are you feeling okay?" And I said, "No, actually, I'm not. I'm kind of out of it. I'm feeling dizzy, lightheaded. This happens a lot. I have anxiety." And she kind of looked at me funny, and she brought the stethoscope around and she put it on my heart, and she's listening, and she said, "Well, I don't know if you have anxiety. I can't tell you if you do or if you don't, but this isn't anxiety. You're in Afib and you're going to the hospital." That was pretty much the first time I'd ever really heard the term. I mean, I know I've heard it in the past, but never gave it any mind or any attention. And so I went to the hospital right from her office, and they did all the tests, and they concluded that yes, I have Afib, and I was on medication right away, blood thinners and baby aspirin and metoprolol. I'm probably not saying that right, but you guys know what I'm talking about. And that went on for almost 2 years, and then seeing cardiologists and going to St. Francis, the Heart Center, St. Francis Hospital, the Heart Center in Long Island, New York. They took amazing care of me from the first time I stepped foot in the door and right through the actual procedure. So yeah, that was kind of the whole trip through hearing about it, getting treated, having the ablation scheduled, leading up to it, and then now post 7 days. I think one of the most important things to keep in mind is that this procedure, although scary because it's your heart and they're burning it and it sounds insane to some people, but it's very, very common nowadays. It's safe. You can read all the statistics. I would say, though, find a doctor, a surgeon, a hospital, a team that specifically does this. Find people who do this as pretty much their entire scope. Obviously, they're going to be better at it. They're going to be more sophisticated, I guess, more up on the technology, obviously more experienced. So find a doctor and find a team that does this almost exclusively, if not exclusively. And Dr. Levine is the one, Dr. Joseph Levine is who performed my surgery, and I'll get into that part now, but I feel incredible, I feel great. So I'll give you a little bit of rundown of what the lead up was that day. So I'm in the hospital about 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the morning, and the first thing they do is kind of get you all, hooked up to monitors and things like that. And the first procedure, I had two that day. Some people will have this procedure that I'm about to talk about prior to the day of. Some will have it day of, and it was the T-scan, T-E-E scan. And that's essentially an endoscopy. If you've had endoscopies, you know what that's like. If you haven't, it's essentially a camera that goes down your throat. And in this case, they're looking directly at your heart for any sign of blood clots. And if you have a clot, obviously they cannot continue with the ablation, and you have to treat the clot and then reschedule the ablation. Luckily, I didn't have any clots, and the T-scan was, I don't know, maybe about 10 minutes. They put you out for it, so you don't feel anything, you don't really remember anything. And maybe about 2 hours after that, I went in for the ablation. Everything was pretty standard. I mean, they go in through, most seem to go in through the groin. They did for me, they did go in through my right groin. So they prep the area first. They shave an area where they want to go into. They shave your chest as well for all the leads and whatnot. And the anesthesiologist came out and put an A-line, put an IV into my artery in my left wrist. And that was pretty much all the prep. And then they wheeled me into the operating room. At this point, I pretty much don't remember much. They're putting on pads, very cold, sort of soft padding all over my back. It felt like individual pads being put from top to bottom. I never really saw them because I was already like lying on the table. Then they asked me to sit up, and they started doing that. I never got to ask what that was for. I know I read about it in the past. I don't remember. But it's just literally putting pads on your back. It was cold, so that was a little, uncomfortable. But a few minutes of talking to the team while that was happening, that's really all I remember. I never got a countdown. I never got, okay, we're ready, we're gonna put you out. None of that. All I remember is having conversations about tattoos, strangely enough. And the next thing I remember is waking up in recovery. And the procedure was about 2 hours. After waking up, you're on mandatory bed rest. You can't move because the main reason is the entry point in the groin. They don't want it to bleed. They also did go through my neck as well. There was an IV point in my neck. So I was lying in the hospital bed on my back, still, essentially really not moving at all for about 6 hours. It wasn't easy. That's not ever easy to do. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to do that. I don't know why you would try to do that. But laying still for all that time is difficult. Your body tenses up, you get sore. But it is important because you don't want to, do anything to the site. You don't want to bleed. And nurses and doctors would come and check the site, make sure everything was okay, and mine was. I had one little complication. My blood pressure had dropped into the mid-70s, and it wouldn't go back up. And the main reason for that, and they were trying to figure out why, doctors had come in, more nurses had come in when this was found out. The reason in my case was dehydration, because I hadn't eaten or drinking anything from about 9 o'clock the night before, and now this is already about 2:30 in the afternoon the next day. So I was very dehydrated, plus the medication you get throughout the procedure is, you're going to be dehydrated, and possibly a reaction to the anesthesia. Another reason is you could be bleeding behind your heart, which they came and they did a sonogram immediately. They brought in a unit and they did a sonogram and they checked everything out. I wasn't bleeding. So it was essentially the first description I gave you. And like I said, this is about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and by about 10 o'clock that night, my blood pressure had gone back to normal. Other than that, though, there were no complications whatsoever. The hospital at St. Francis was great. The people were great. I slowly started to, be elevated and can sit up, and then they started, walking me around the hospital floor where I was, just to get some movement. And you want to move around after laying still for 6 hours. So I did that, got a decent night's sleep, believe it or not, and went home the next morning, probably about 11:30 or so, maybe. I've been in normal sinus rhythm ever since. I had one tiny small episode, the first evening I was home, and it lasted for 2 minutes. I timed it. Most of the episodes I had with Afib prior to the ablation, pretty much all of them, were at least an hour, usually much more than an hour. And I've had episodes 8 to 10 hours at a time. So to have one for 2 minutes and go away and then not have another one since is amazing. And if you know what the procedure does, and you should, if you're, close to having one, they're burning the electrical pulses that go in the wrong direction and go take the wrong path throughout your heart, and they cause and create scar tissue by burning them. It takes time for this scar tissue to completely heal. The blanking period, as they call it, is usually about 3 months. So it is very common and normal to still feel episodes of some of those electrical pulses making their way through before things are really healed. So that's probably what happened in my case. But it was 2 minutes tops, and it hasn't happened since. And that was the first day I was home. And it's now 7 days since the surgery. I do feel a little bit better. The soreness is all gone. My groin isn't really that sore anymore. Neither is my neck or my back or any spots that were sore from laying flat for so long. I'm starting to get my wind back. My energy is coming back. I can already feel the difference in my heart, because being in normal sinus rhythm for a week straight is something that I haven't felt in over 10 years. And it's amazing. It's really hard to describe if you don't know what Afib feels like. But if you do know what it feels like, being in normal sinus rhythm is incredible. I feel new. I feel like a new person. And I know that it's going to give me greater energy going forward, as long as it doesn't come back. And if anybody's wondering, I'm 46 years old. This is my first ablation. I'm relatively healthy otherwise. I don't have any other heart issues that I knew of prior or that were detected since. My doctors give me over a 90% chance of never needing another ablation because of those other factors. And they believe they got all of the area on both the left and right side of my heart that they wanted to get. We'll know more in 3 months, obviously, when everything heals up completely. But yeah, it's so far, and I keep reading. I'm in a group on Facebook, an Afib support group on Facebook, and it's really great. I would suggest you all go and look for that, because people ask all sorts of questions. You can ask questions, and you get a bunch of answers. So anything you can find out about it is going to be helpful, and that's really why I did this. There's a link in my bio here on YouTube for my Medium account. I write on Medium about all different topics, but I've written about Afib a couple of times and the procedure, and I'm going to write more about it as time goes on, and possibly make some more videos about it. If you have any questions about my experience or anything, that's all I can really answer. I'm clearly not a doctor, and I don't want to give you medical advice. I can only tell you what I went through and what I feel like and what my experience was. But if you want to leave comments and ask questions, I can give you my response based on my experience to that. And again, hopefully this video helps you feel at ease. You always see people say, yeah, it's a piece of cake and all that stuff. And look, for the most part, I guess it is. It could be way worse, right? We're not having open heart surgery. We're not having heart attacks, like things of that nature. But when you're the one on the table, nothing's a piece of cake. Nothing is easy. It's, because it's you. And No matter how common, no matter how experienced the doctors are, no matter how relatively safe these procedures are now, and they are, you still have that moment where, you know, human brain just kind of goes in the wrong direction and you think of the worst. That's completely normal. I did it throughout the whole time. But in hindsight and looking back and really taking stock of what I went through, it pretty much was a piece of cake. So hopefully yours is as well, and everybody has normal sinus rhythm going forward, and you don't need a second one if you are going for your first. So good luck to everybody. Thank you for watching, and again, click the link if you want to see some of my writing on Medium. Like I said, I've written about this before, and I will again. And if you have any questions about my experience, I'd be happy to answer them when I can. All right, thanks.